George jolted awake, heart pounding. The clock read 3:15 a.m. again. Every night for weeks, he'd woken at this exact time. He turned to wake his wife, but her side of the bed was empty. George felt uneasy as he heard her whispering downstairs. Something was wrong in this house. They'd known it from the day they moved in, but they couldn't explain it. The air felt thick and heavy. The shadows seemed to move when no one was looking. And now, his wife's voice, talking to someone or something that shouldn't be there. On November 13th, 1974, gunshots shattered the peace of 112 Ocean Avenue in Amityville, where the DeFeo family lived. They seemed like a normal family to their neighbors. Ronald and Louise DeFeo had 4 children, with Ronald Jr., known as Butch, being the oldest. That night, Butch DeFeo killed his entire family. He shot his parents and siblings as they slept. The police found a disturbing scene. All 6 victims lay face down in their beds. Strangely, no one heard the gunshots. The neighbors didn't wake up. Butch DeFeo's story changed often. He first blamed a mob hitman. Then he claimed voices told him to kill. His behavior during the investigation puzzled the police. He switched between upset and calm. They couldn't understand him. People began to wonder about the house itself. Some thought it might have influenced Butch's actions. Was there an evil force in the building? In the end, Butch DeFeo went to prison. The court found him guilty. He received 6 life sentences, 1 for each murder. But questions lingered. Why did he do it? What really happened that night? The DeFeo murders were only the beginning of the house's dark history. More odd events would unfold at 112 Ocean Avenue. The quiet street in Amityville would never be the same. A year after the murders, 112 Ocean Avenue got new owners. The Lutzes thought they'd found their dream home, but instead of a dream, they got thrown into their worst nightmare. George and Kathy Lutz fell in love with the big house on Ocean Avenue. It had lots of rooms and a nice yard. The price was low because of what happened there, but the Lutzes didn't care. They moved in with their 3 kids in December 1975. At first, things seemed normal. The family was happy in their new home, but soon, weird things started to happen. The house felt cold in some spots, even when the heat was on. Strange noises came from empty rooms. The family tried to explain it away. Maybe it was just an old house settling, they said. But the odd events kept happening. Doors would open and close by themselves. Things would move when no one was around. The family's dog acted scared all the time. It was like the house had a mind of its own. The Lutzes tried to ignore these things. They told themselves it was nothing, but deep down, they knew something was wrong. The air in the house felt heavy. It was hard to breathe sometimes. The kids had bad dreams every night. George and Kathy started to feel scared. They didn't want to admit it, but the house scared them. They felt like something was always watching them. The happy feeling they had when they moved in was completely gone. Now they felt nervous all the time. As days went by, The strange events got worse and worse. The family couldn't explain them away anymore. They knew something wasn't right in their new home, but they had no idea how bad things would get. What the Lutzes experienced next would push them to their limits. As days passed, the Lutzes realized they weren't just living in a house, they were trapped in it. The weird events got worse and happened more often. They couldn't ignore them anymore. One night, Kathy saw something that made her blood run cold. Two glowing red eyes stared at her from the darkness. She blinked, and they were gone. But the fear stayed with her. Objects in the house seemed to have a life of their own. Books flew off shelves. Chairs moved by themselves. The family watched in horror as a heavy ceramic lion floated across the room. But nothing scared them more than the green slime. It oozed from the walls and ceilings. It was thick and smelled awful. No matter how much they cleaned, it kept coming back. These events took a toll on the family. They were always on edge, waiting for the next scary thing to happen. They couldn't sleep. They jumped at every sound. The kids cried a lot. George and Kathy argued more. They started to wonder what was causing all this. Was it ghosts, demons, or something even worse? The not knowing made everything scarier. Finally, they knew they needed help. They couldn't handle this alone anymore. They decided to talk to a priest. Maybe he could make sense of what was happening. But even as they reached out for help, the house had other plans. The Lutz family had seen strange things in their house, but nothing prepared them for what came next. They started to see ghosts, not just shadows or blurs, but full-bodied spirits. Kathy saw a woman in white floating at the foot of her bed. The ghost had long hair and a sad face. It vanished when Kathy blinked. George woke up one night to find a pig-like creature with red eyes staring at him. It had huge teeth and seemed ready to attack him. The kids saw things too. They told their parents about a little boy who played in their room at night. He had no feet and faded away when they tried to talk to him. These sights changed George. He became obsessed with the house. He spent hours in the basement staring at the walls. He stopped going to work. His temper got worse. He yelled at his family for no reason. Kathy had her own scary experiences. She woke up with bruises she couldn't explain. They looked like hand marks, as if someone had grabbed her in her sleep. She also had visions of the DeFeo murders. She saw the family being shot in their beds over and over. The family knew they were in danger. The house seemed angry. Doors slammed on their own. Glass shattered for no reason. The air felt thick and hard to breathe. They worried the house might try to hurt them like it had hurt the DeFeos. One night, they reached their breaking point. George woke up at exactly 3:15 a.m. again, drenched in cold sweat. But that wasn't the worst. When he turned to his wife, he found Kathy levitating off the bed. Her body was rigid and her eyes were open, but she didn't respond. When she finally came down, she screamed that she had seen a demon. They knew they had to leave. The house was taking over their minds. They felt that if they stayed, something terrible would certainly happen to them. They had to make a decision. As the news started to cover their case, the Lutzes faced a stark choice: stay and risk their lives, or run and lose everything. But on that cold January night, the decision became clear. They just couldn't take it any longer. The last days in the house were a blur of fear. Strange noises echoed through the halls at all hours. The walls seemed to breathe. Doors slammed shut on their own. The family huddled together, too scared to sleep alone. George's 3:15 a.m. wake-ups got worse. Every night, like clockwork, he jolted awake in a cold sweat. He felt a dark presence in the room watching him. The time matched when the DeFeo murders happened. Was the house trying to tell him something? Kathy saw more ghosts. They appeared in mirrors and windows, their faces twisted in pain. The kids cried all the time, begging to leave. Even the dog refused to come inside anymore. And so it was. On January 14th, 1976, they reached their breaking point. That was the morning when George woke up to find Kathy floating above the bed. Her eyes were open but blank. When she came down, she screamed about demons. They knew they had to get out. Now, in a panic, the Lutzes grabbed what they could and ran. They left behind clothes, toys, and furniture. Everything in the house felt tainted. As they drove away, they felt the house's anger. It didn't want to let them go. The family was a mess. The kids were shaken and pale. George and Kathy looked like they hadn't slept in weeks. They all jumped at every sound, sure that something evil had been following them. What did they leave behind in that house? Were there clues that could explain what happened? Or was it better left untouched? The world wondered as news of their escape spread. The Lutzes found a safe place to stay, but their ordeal wasn't over. The memories of those 28 days haunted them. They couldn't shake the feeling that something dark had latched onto them. But their story is not over just yet. The Lutz's story spread like wildfire. News shows, papers, and magazines all wanted to talk to them. People were scared and curious. Many felt sorry for the family and what they went through. But doubts started to creep in. Some people thought the whole thing was made up. They said the Lutzes were just trying to get rich and famous. Some critics pointed out that no one else had ever reported ghosts in the house before. Experts started to look into the case. They went to the house and searched for proof. Some said they found strange things like cold spots and odd noises. Others said there was nothing unusual at all. The story had a big impact on pop culture. Books, movies, and TV shows were made about the haunting. The real estate market in Amityville took a hit. No one wanted to live near the horror house. As time went on, more questions came up. People were accusing them of making up the whole case. But the Lutzes stuck to their story. According to them, they really did see and feel those scary things. They even passed lie detector tests and seemed truly scared when talking about it. After all, decades later, the truth behind the Amityville Horror remains elusive. No one knows for sure what really happened at 112 Ocean Avenue. If we want to be very skeptic, it is possible that the Lutzes made it all up. But also, it is possible that maybe they really did see those scary things. We may never know the answers, but the Amityville Horror keeps us thinking and wondering about what might be out there in the dark. I hope you enjoyed this terrifying story as much as I did. If you did, don't forget to subscribe because I've got plenty more on the way. And if you'd like to support the channel and help me create more videos like this one, feel free to check out the Patreon page linked in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.